I did not see any form of damage to the door or the door frame that stood out to me that would make me believe that that door was damaged upon somebody breaking into the residence if they did need to use force to make entry into the residence. The other thing that stood out to me was the house was very nice, very clean, very organized, and there was nothing that appeared to be disturbed, knocked over, broken, as if somebody broke in and has encountered multiple individuals inside of a residence. Usually there's some form of, disturbance inside the house that causes things to be out of place.
Did you observe or see if anything appeared to had been opened or looked through?
The only thing that stood out to me that appeared to be opened was right when you enter into the basement door, the fireplace was to the right, and on the brick of the fireplace was a box of ammunition that had been poured out onto the brick in front of the fireplace.
Did you observe any shell casing or other ammunition throughout the house?
When I had placed Corsa back into my squad car and I came back to the back door of the residence and stepped into the living room area, at that time I did see some spent shell casings on the floor just inside the back door behind the couch.
Did you go anywhere else in the house to look at the other areas that were searched by officers?
I had stepped in initially there where those shell casings were, and then I noticed that the bedroom to the left there was full of lots of items. Therefore, I just stepped in with my flashlight because it was dark and just kind of glanced around with my flashlight to just kind of do a secondary sweep of that room to make sure that nobody would have been hiding in that room due to the amount of stuff that was in there.
Did you get a chance to look at the firearm that was located next to Jan Jackson's body?
I did see the firearm laying on the ground to the side of Mr. Jackson's body. From the viewpoint, when I came over and I stopped with Corsa and held her while the other officers were moving throughout the basement. And then at the point that I picked Corsa up and I carried her so that I could get past Jan Jackson's body to the bottom of the stairs so that Corsa wasn't getting near the body or stepping in any kind of blood. As I walked past him, I also walked past the gun, still seeing it laying on the ground there. Did
you recognize what type of gun it was?
It was a long gun, but I wasn't familiar with anything else that stood out to me to be able to say what type of gun it was other than a long gun.
And it doesn't sound like you handled it much, but when you looked at it, could you tell how you could load the gun?
I didn't look at it close enough because I was so focused on, keeping my eyes on places where there could be a potential threat of people while we were clearing the residence.
Why didn't you have Corsa search the house?
Because as I stated earlier, Corsa, when she deploys into a structure to search for a person, she is trained to locate body odor, use body odor to locate the person. Therefore, if I would have deployed her into the residence from the open door, she can't determine whether a person is a victim or whether they're a suspect. She just goes off the body odor and locating a person. So knowing that we had an individual inside the residence who was on the phone with dispatch stating that he was injured, I could not deploy Corsa in this incident due to the fact for safety issues for the individual that was shot in the foot.
And with the shell casings that you said that you found by like the couch area, mm-hmm. Where were those shell cases? Where exactly were they located?
I recall they were a few feet in from the door that we entered into.
Would they have been on the side next to the coffee table or the one behind the couch?
Behind the couch.
From entering the basement door to going to where those couches was there anything that would obstruct or prevent a person from entering and leaving without knocking something over?
A person could come in and go to the right or the left of the couch and be able to walk without running into stuff.
And when you observed the couches and the coffee table, did they appear to be moved or disturbed?
No.
After you did this initial protective sweep, what did you do next?
Are you asking once I put Corsa in the car and came back in the house?
Yes.
Once I glanced through that basement bedroom again that was dark with my flashlight, I stepped back out of the bedroom to the living room area. At that time, Officer Barber came downstairs, and him and I spoke for a moment just about what was going on, kind of, where we needed to proceed from here. And then I exited the residence because we deemed the house to be clear and safe at that point. And we were going to stand by and wait for a search warrant to be prepared for the residence to continue a further investigation. And so I exited the residence.
Did you and your canine partner, Corsa, did you guys do anything together?
Yes, we did.
What did you guys do together?
I then, at that point, was going to attempt a track off the information that we had on this call from the caller stating that the subject broke into the house and then was believed that he left out the back door. So I went back to my squad car after giving Corsa a break from being in the house, and I removed her from the squad car and prepared her for an attempted track.
And once again, you testified earlier today, this morning, that Corsa is certified to do tracking. Is that correct?
Yes.
And can you explain to me a little bit in detail what you and Corsa had to do in order to be certified to be able to track for individuals?
First through training, she's taught how to track, and then once we do our certification for tracking, at that time, tracking through NAPWADA, the certification program, they have set standards for the tracking scenario for that program. And their standards is a track that's approximately 400 yards long. It has 2 to 3 turns in it. It also has a cross track. The cross track is a separate individual that did not lay the track, has to go off to the side and then walk and come across the track that was laid by the track layer, and the dog has to be able to track past that cross track. So the track is laid. It's unknown to myself, unknown to the dog. Has to sit for approximately 45 minutes, an hour, due to the discretion of the NAPWADA certified judge. Once that track has been laid and has sat for a set period of time, the judge for NAPWADA would then tell me to get Corsa and prepare her for a track. At that moment, I would remove Corsa from the squad car. I would go through my set routine of preparing her for a track. Her routine for preparing her for a track, I get her out, I let her have a few moments to just be a dog and go to the bathroom. That way she's not needing to go to the bathroom while she's trying to track. I then place a harness on her body. That is her tracking harness. She knows that when that harness goes on that she is tracking over repetitions of time of training over and over again. I place the harness on her on her body. I walk her up to the area of where we are going to attempt the track. The judge for NAPWADA would give me the general area of a starting point. It wouldn't be, this is your start point right here. This is the general area. Once Corsa and I approach to that area, I place her into an off position. I switch her long line leash from her collar on her neck to the hook that is on the top of her harness. At that point, I then give verbal announcements, which is protocol for our police department's guidelines. I give 2 loud verbal announcements identifying myself as a police officer with a canine and anybody in the area to sound off, or they could possibly be bit. And then I give a last and final warning of, this is your last and final warning, and I give that announcement again. That is a routine for Corsa. She knows when we do that, that's what we're getting ready to do. She's in the off, relaxed position. Once I'm ready to go, I then give her command to her for tracking. At that time, she will get up and go out and start sniffing the ground, searching to find that track. In the certification track, we have to locate the start of the track, and then Corsa has to be able to follow that track that was laid by the track layer. At some point during that track, she will come into contact with the cross track by the other individual. She has to be able to continue on that same track and not go off on a direction of the cross track. At the training tracks, like in this scenario, her Kong, which would be her reward toy, will be at the end of the track. So we have to track the unknown track until we locate that toy. And if we are able to find the track and track properly, stay with the track, and complete the track to the end to NAPWADA standards, then you are certified in the tracking area.
How old is Corsa when she first begins to be trained on how to track?
Corsa was, I want to say she was 21 months approximately when I got her in May of 2019. At that time, she came from the foreign countries, and she came directly over to the United States through a kennel called Shallow Creek Kennels. The owner of the kennel went over to to the foreign countries and selected dogs for his training courses, also selecting 3 dogs for our department. Corsa was selected for me and brought back to Pennsylvania. Once she arrived in Pennsylvania, I went out with Sergeant Bieber at the time and picked up Corsa along with the other 2 dogs, brought them back here to Cedar Rapids, and then after a couple days, just letting the dogs relax, Officer Schumann, who was on the canine unit, had completed a 12-week trainer's course, and Officer Schumann was going to train the dogs and trained myself and the new handlers. That took place for 4 weeks, where Corsa started to get imprinted on her explosive odors that she has to detect, her bite work, and she was taught to track at that time.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're saying a lot, and I appreciate it.
Yep.
But I kind of want to take it a little bit step by step, so it's a little bit clearer, okay? So it sounded like you got her when she was 21 months to begin training.
Yep.
And so just kind of appreciate it, slow down, but just walk me through of how is a canine, or how is Corsa trained to do proper tracking, and explain that training, and just let's break it down piece by piece, okay?
Okay.
So what's the first thing that she's shown or trained in order to perform a proper track?
So to start with, in that beginning of training is, to my knowledge, when she was first taught to track. What you do is have somebody walk and scuff the ground. You bring the dog up and you place them into an off position. You give them the command to track. You keep them on a short leash. The dog is sniffing the ground. They start following that disturbed odor that's on the ground. You keep them on a tight line to keep them right on that line where that person walked. It's usually going to be a short, straight line to start with. At the end of that short track will be their toy. Corsa's instance is a Kong. She finds her Kong, so then she associates, I follow this odor, I find my Kong. And you just do that repetition after repetition after repetition. So we did that in our training school multiple times. And when she learns the concept, you start making the tracks harder. They start to get longer. They start to add turns. Then you start to not scuff the ground as much to make the odor not as strong. And they have to continue to do repetitions over and over again of tracking.
Who is personally handling or with Corsa when she's learning to be trained to track?
I was handling her because of my 10 years of experience being a canine handler prior to getting Corsa, is why I joined Officer Schumann in the 4 weeks of pre-training with Corsa and the 2 other dogs.
So it's a 4-week program before Corsa then is ready to be seen if she could be certified then?
No, we did 4 weeks of teaching the dogs their odors, tracking, and bite work so that they kind of knew what they were doing. And then after 4 weeks, Officer Vrye and Officer Bergen, who were the 2 handlers that were going to be taking the other 2 dogs that we had. They were brand new handlers and never handled dogs before. So they joined us after 4 weeks of Officer Schumann and myself assisting her on the pre-training of the dogs. And then we trained for another 8 weeks. So we trained for a total of approximately 12 weeks with these dogs before we did our first certification.
And you are with her throughout these 12 weeks learning her cues or her indications of what she finds or doesn't find during this tracking period.
Yes.
Explain to me, you said that Corsa will give an indication when she has found something. Explain that in layman. What do you mean by that?
When you're saying as in found something, there's a variety of things in canine of finding something, or do you want me to describe her behaviors in tracking?
Let's first start with that. Just slowly describe when you started tracking, what does she first do?
Okay. So after I've gone through my routine of preparing her for the track, giving her announcements, I then give her the command to track. What I'm going to do is scan her. I'm going to scan her over an area that I want her to search and try to locate a track. So if we have an area where we believe a person has left a scene, walked, ran, she will scan. What I'm looking for is her cues of her head snap. So if she's scanning across and she's smelling the ground and all of a sudden she catches odor of where somebody has walked, I'm going to look for all of a sudden she's going to kind of stop and she's going to have a head snap because she's going to snap down to that odor. And then when Corsa tracks, she buries her nose to the ground. So as soon as she has that head snap and turn, she investigates and she buries her nose to the ground and takes off. In our terms of canine, we call that an on-ramp. Okay, she's coming across, she hits the odor, and she's onto the track. Now, when Corsa takes off tracking, like I said, she keeps her nose buried to the ground. I've got her on a long line, so I'm anywhere from 15 to 30 feet behind her, depending on what leash I have hooked to her and where we're at. At that point, once she shows me the behavior that she's tracking with her nose buried to the ground, she's wagging her tail. All I'm doing is holding her leash, and I'm giving her a little bit of tension, and that is just that I'm right behind her. So then I try to stay behind her, and all she's doing is pulling me, letting me know that she wants to keep going, and that tells me that she is on that odor. So placing all those behaviors together and watching her search with her nose to the ground, I can tell that she's tracking.
When do you know that she has found what she's looking for, that she would stop tracking?
So if it's her toy that's at the end of a track, as soon as she gets to that toy, she will stop and she will pick up the toy, and then we will play. We'll make it fun because it's a game for her that she's tracking because she knows that at the end she's going to find that toy, and then we play. So we make it fun so that the next time I bring her out the track, that's why she comes out of the squad car so excited because she's like, Dad's putting my harness on, we're going to work, I'm going to go out and I'm going to search and I'm going to find my toy.
What about when you are actually looking for a person? Describe when she has found or that scent has disappeared. What are the signs or indication that you know that she's done tracking?
So when I am doing a track for a suspect, when Corsa's tracking, say there's a lot of things come into play. Say there's a turn in the track, and depending on your wind direction at that time, she may be tracking along, and the wind may push the odor of that track where she's currently at past the turn. So as soon as she runs out of odor, Corsa's sign to me that she has lost odor is she raises her head up in the air, and that's what's called a negative. At that point, I hold my position, and she starts to spin a circle, and she, with that tension from me on the line, she drops her nose back down, and she starts to sniff the ground. All we're doing is spinning a circle, looking for what direction that track turned and went. As soon as she's coming along, she hits the odor of where the track continued on. Once again, straight back from what I described earlier, when she starts the track, I see that change of behavior. She stops, she smells, she has the head snap, and she turns and she starts pulling.
Officer Buckles, I'm not trying to interrupt you again, but I just need to make sure that you kind of slow down so our court reporter can make sure she gets everything. So just take a breath. You're saying a lot of information.
There's just a lot.
I understand, but just take a breath and slow down a little bit slower so our court reporter can get that.
Okay.
While we're taking a little pause, you two in front look like maybe you're straining your necks a little bit. If you want to angle your chairs so they're facing the way you stand, if that would help, feel free to do that. You could even scoot back one if you wanted to, however. Does that help some? All right. I just worried about you folks getting a major crick in your neck. All right, Mr. Shear?
Thank you. And Officer Buckles, if you start to talk a little bit faster, I'm going to interrupt you just to slow you down, okay, sir?
Okay.
So where you left off, we were talking about when Corsa gives you a negative indicator that she kind of snaps her head up and then back down and goes in circles. Let's pick up on the portion where you said she gives you a negative indicator and start from there.
Okay. So once she gives me that negative, I allow her to circle to find the remainder of the track. Once she picks where there could be a turn, she picks that turn up, she gets back on, she's right back on the track. We're then back to tracking again.
And so what is her indication or indicators when she actually finds a suspect or someone that you are actually trying to locate or track?
So there could be two different endings to a track of a person. Say the person has hunkered down and hidden. When she gets to that person, if the wind direction's not exactly right, she may track right up to that person. At that point, she is going to apprehend that person by biting them. If, depending on the circumstances, because every situation is different, when she's tracking and she gets close and all of a sudden she can smell a strong odor of that person because the person's now hunkered down and been sitting there and all that body odor is just pooling in the area, she will give me what is called a proximity alert. At that point, she will come up with her nose and she will start to stick her chest out and put her nose up in the air, sniffing really hard because all that odor is pooling up. So at that point, if she gives me a proximity alert, I would stop her with her leash, and at that time we would stop and I would give more verbal announcements, giving that person another opportunity to give themselves up.
And you also talked about difference of tracking human odor with vegetation disturbance and tracking on the ground and that. What do you mean when Corsa is tracking and there's signs of vegetation disturbance or there's signs that a path or something's been disturbed? What is she looking for or what are you looking for to determine that there is actually disturbance there?
So through my training of canine schools, canine conferences, the dog is tracking the disturbed vegetation. Every time you step on the ground, as humans, we cannot always see it. We cannot smell it. Dogs can smell way better than we can as humans. That's why we use canines. So every time you walk across grass, you step on the blades of grass, you're actually cracking those blades of grass. That is causing a disturbed vegetation odor. Okay, it's different than anything else in that area because all the other grass is fresh. The dog is smelling that odor, following that. But then you get into whether it's like rocks or gravel, you still step on it, you're still creating a disturbed odor that is different than anywhere else right there. So the dog is following that path in a combination of humans losing odor as they are walking, running, and the dog can still smell that as they're following that disturbed vegetation.
And did you follow the steps and procedures to begin your track with this case as you've described to us on how you normally do a track for an individual?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, at this time, continuing with State's Exhibit Number 2, I would ask to publish for the jury the portion labeled Buckles Body Cam Number 2.
We will do that, but you know what? It's after lunch on a Friday afternoon. We're not going to take a break, but before we get to the video and dim the lights a little bit, I want everybody to stand up and make sure we're all awake for a minute. All right, everybody good? Mr., okay. Well, I have it. I've got it here. Try this again. I've got it on my screen.
We may have to reboot. And for the record purpose, Judge, this video is about 26 minutes long.
That's why we took a stretch.
Sita. Off. 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 Justin, are you coming with me? Hey, Justin, are you coming with me? Off. 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 Hey, Barbara, where are you at? You want to come over here and walk with me? We can still do the back door from where we're at. Justin got tied up. I figure if we're just working right here, but Sarge has been over to talk to this lady. Brown walked through, so we'll work that, but we can still view the back door. Justin went across the street and he was going to walk with me. Off. Off. Alright, well, I guess we go down. Brown took that path. That could work. Yeah, he came down this way and got behind those trees to look in and see that the window was open. So I'll work that. We can work up in this yard here, but like I said, Sarge and all them will walk through here, so we can try on that way. But well, unless you had a way up there or a car up there, if this was actually something set up there. Sierra Rapids Police Canine, anybody in the area, sound off, you will be bit by my dog. Sierra Rapids Police Canine, anybody in the area, sound off, or you will be bit by my dog. Yeah. Last and final warning! Cedar Rapids Police Canine, anybody in there, sound off, you will be bit by my dog. Go shoot. Clear the yard first. Horse, come here. Go shoot. Horse. When you talk to these construction workers, though, at some point, make sure no one, she's not picking anything up coming through here, so.
I might just go last and how long you've been there.
Yeah, well, and I'll watch it and I'll work the wood line, or that path line. Shoot. Good girl. Go shoot. Same thing. Come here. Good job. Of course not. Good girl. What? Okay. Good girl.
Officer Buckles, is there any more searching that you do with Corsa when she lays down there?
No.
Officer Buckles, I do want to ask some follow-up questions with what we just observed on State's Exhibit 2, the second portion of your body cam footage, okay?
Yep.
And remember, talk slow as well, please, sir. You get Corsa out of the vehicle about 10 minutes after from when you initially put her in. Do you have any concerns that any odor that you were going to look for may have been gone by then?
No.
Why not?
Just with the area, with the grass, the timber area is nice and shaded, so it takes longer for odor to dissipate in those areas. And just the time frame when Corsa is been trained and has been successful on finishing tracks that are that have been sitting for approximately 1 hour or longer or somewhere around in that area. And she's done that several times. So I knew that she could still be successful at locating a track.
So 10 minutes is kind of a small time frame than what Corsa has been able to locate before in other longer time frames.
Can I ask, when you say the 10 minutes from when I placed her in the car to getting her back out to track?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it was just more to put her away, let her get a drink, kind of figure out what was going on. I lined up Officer Kaczynski to walk with me as my cover officer, that's why I stood there waiting, because he was supposed to come with me, and then he got tasked with something else, so then I had to wait for Officer Barber.
And that was going to be a follow-up question as well, is why were you waiting for Officer Kaczynski or Officer Barber, or just any officer to join you in this search?
Anytime we do canine-related track area search, building search, we always have at least one, if not more, officers with us as our lethal cover, because we are watching the dog, we are holding the dog's leash, and we do not have our lethal weapon out as cover if we were to come across somebody.
So this officer's kind of acting like as your shield or your protector,
Correct.
because your main focus is to watch all of these signs or indication that Corsa would give you.
Yes.
Were you concerned at all about the weather, how hot or how humid it was becoming that day?
It was a summer warm day, but being about 9 o'clock in the morning, I wasn't concerned with it. And like I stated earlier, with a lot of that timber area being shaded, that wasn't a concern to me.
We see when you get Corsa out of the car that she seems very eager. She's panting, breathing hard. Was that concerns that she wasn't going to be able to do her job?
No, it's just dogs breathe through their mouth as a way to get air to cool themselves, and they can't always constantly breathe through their nose. She's just excited. She's got drive. Like I said earlier, she's a Belgian Malinois. They're known for high drive. They love to work. She's excited to get out because she knows she's going to go do something.
And as we're seeing that you're performing this track, you still hear that breathing and that panting. Mm-hmm. Any concerns that she's getting tired or exhausted and not able to perform this track successful?
Well, obviously, with any dog, the longer the dog searches and sniffs, they're going to get tired. Same thing as humans. The longer we try to sit and smell stuff, we're going to get tired. But when you hear her panting, all she's trying to do is just get more air. But when you see her track, when I rode the commanded track and she goes out and she puts her nose to the ground, she's sniffing the ground. She's closing her mouth, she's smelling the ground. She's scanning. She's going to come up at points, and she's going to open up her mouth just to take a quick break. If she would have conducted that entire search that you guys saw with her mouth closed and just using her nose, that would have made her tired a lot faster. Dogs can still catch odor through their mouth, through their sensory glands, and detect the odor. And when they do so is when you'll see a change in them that, as a handler, is what we watch for, that change in behavior where all of a sudden they close their mouth and they start smelling with their nose. So she's down using her nose to smell the ground. She comes up, take a quick break. She's breathing through her mouth. Even when she goes down, if she has her mouth open and is smelling along the ground, she can still pick up odor through her olfactor of her mouth.
We see multiple times in that video you're kind of working that leash by giving it some tension or kind of releasing it or pulling Corsa back? Explain to me, what are we seeing when you're working that leash?
It's a combination of just, guiding her. She's working along. All of a sudden, maybe she might turn and start to spin back towards me. So I'm bringing the leash in so that I don't leave a bunch of slack leash in between the dog and I. And then she turns, she goes to work back out, and I'm just feeding her a little bit of leash to let her go explore and investigate. And then, like I explained earlier, once I see her change behavior where she picks up odor and shows me those signs that she's on odor and she's tracking, that's when I hold the leash tight. But just allowing her to freely search to locate that disturbed vegetation, I'm just working the leash to keep the slack out of it.
Are you anytime directing her or guiding her where to go?
If there's points where I let her go out and search, but then if I've covered an area and I want to go move to a different area, I might use the leash to guide her over to that area.
But in general, who is the leader in this search?
Corsa is.
We saw in your body cam video, the first portion, that there were multiple people outside that home. That consist of officers, paramedics, firefighters. Were you concerned at all that with that amount of people in that close area of the house, that had contaminated the area to do a proper search?
Observing, where we walked up to the house, went down that cement path underneath the deck to the back door, knowing the firefighters and the paramedics went down there, I knew that. And when I'm standing off to the side waiting to prepare the search, as I'm standing there, I'm overlooking the area that I'm going to do. It's routine before any time I start Corsa. I'm looking at the situation that I have, the outlay that I have, and I'm deciding how I want to break this down into sections to work the dog. Knowing that that was an area that several people had walked down that path is why I wanted to stay away, and that's why I started out farther. Another section of there is I knew Officer Brown had split away from me and went down that path by that tree. Therefore is why I started her in the area that I did to go between that path and that house that was behind the residence. And what I'm looking for is she's checking that area that is fresh away from where Officer Brown had walked. And from my first initial observation of when I arrived on scene and was approaching the house, that I did not see anybody out walking around.
So it sounds like you tried to start a search where you have not seen or you don't believe there was anybody there when you first begin your search.
Correct.
So it kind of would not make sense to start a search where you saw Officer Brown standing,
Correct.
or where you saw paramedics standing,
Correct.
or even to do a search right by the basement door because so many people had come and gone already.
Yes.
Your Honor, can I pull up the map for demonstrative purposes at this time?
You may.
Your Honor, may I approach the screen?
You may.
And also, Douglas, you should be able to see that also on your TV.
Yes.
You see that?
Yep.
Officer Buckles, looking at me real quick. This is 4414, the Jackson house. Your search seemed to continue to go around away from the Jackson house down Scarlet Oak Court northeast, above the neighbor's house, making your way back. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why didn't you search any of the area with the driveway, the front of the house, basically the path that you would have took from your squad car to the house? Why was none of that searched?
Because I knew that was where our initial approach was to the residence. Myself, Officer Brown had gone up to the back corner of the house, Sergeant Hansen, we had all walked right through that area. Then also that was our in and out path for our firefighters and paramedics to get to Mr. Jackson to provide him medical attention as soon as possible.
At any time during this track, did Corsa indicate the presence of an individual?
I did notice a change of behavior in her when she was working that rock path. In that area, I was having her work both sides of the path in the vegetation so that if someone did leave that residence and cross through the vegetation, most likely they would have stepped on vegetation or knocked vegetation over, creating that disturbed odor, for her to pick that up. As we were working along through that area, she did cross over and come up to those 2 trees, and she buried her nose to the ground right there next to the tree and was sniffing it very hard. I knew that when she did that, she was smelling where Officer Brown was because I had seen where he had went and hunkered down next to that tree.
So when she did a change of behavior behind the tree, that was because where Officer Brown was standing?
Yes.
What about the area where you kind of saw a change of behavior near the rock path?
Sorry, near the what?
You said that you saw a change of behavior near a rock path.
No, I was having her work down the rock path and work the vegetation on both sides of the rock path. There's, I guess I'd say, overgrown bushes, plants type things. So I was having her check the vegetation on both sides of that rock path.
And I thought you said you saw a change of her behavior on that rock path. Was there, I'm just trying to figure out how many times did you see a change of behavior to Corsa?
So when she was searching the vegetation on both sides of that rock path and we were working down that path, I saw her change of behavior when she got over to those trees where she stopped and she was smelling right where Officer Brown was by the trees to take a view at the back of the house.
Okay, so the only change of behavior you saw her was where Officer Brown was originally
Yes.
standing.
Yes.
You didn't see her change any behavior anywhere else.
No.
And you knew that the area where she changed her behaviors because that's where you saw Officer Brown standing.
Yes.
In your experience as a canine officer, would you expect if an individual had been in a struggle with somebody and ran out, that there would have been some type of strong odor left behind or any odor left behind?
Yes, I would believe that a person who has done something wrong, committed a crime, broke into this residence, and things, went different than what I would assume would be planned, where now several people have been shot, that person would be leaving in a hurry. Therefore, they would not be careful on whether they're stepping on things, trampling over vegetation, breaking it, knocking it over, and they would be losing a lot of fear body odor because of the incident that just happened.
And what is fear body odor?
It's just, if you take any person, when you're normal, you still have body odor. Now you've done something wrong, you're nervous, maybe a person starts to sweat, and just their nervousness starts to create more odor in the body. So all of my training throughout the years of canine, they've always talked about how the body loses more body odor when you have a fear odor or you're really nervous about something.
And you had stated earlier that most of the time, or you usually try to, when you let Corsa out before you start a track, is to use the bathroom, play, and then begin the track. In this scenario, we saw that Corsa got out, played it briefly, but while she was doing her track, had stopped and used the bathroom. Would that have interfered or affected her tracking at all?
No, there's times where they do. It's just when I was trying to break her before, she just, I guess, did not have to go to the bathroom bad enough where once she was searching for a while, she decided that she needed to stop and take a moment of a break.
Anything about her track that you thought wasn't performed properly?
Nothing. I worked her over a large area in that backyard for any pass of leaving that area, and I gave her multiple attempts of scanning her back and forth over and over again.
And did all of these events occur in Lynn County?
Yes, they did.
Thank you, Officer Buckles. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination? Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Johnson, you want to get your mic on? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Officer Buckles.
Good afternoon.
When the dog is being trained, like Corsa, do you keep logs of those training activities?
Yes, I do.
All right. And is it your testimony here today that your dog can track over concrete?
Over concrete?
Yes.
Yes.
Down a street?
Well, it's, the dog can track and cross cement areas, rock areas, whether it's gravel, and locate odor of disturbance of vegetation, say on the other side of the road, and continue on with the track.
Right, but it sounded like on direct testimony, you testified that your dog could track human odor left on cement or a street, and you're saying that's not the case.
No, when a person is, say, walking, running, and they cross cement, they can still leave odor behind on that cement that the dog could possibly detect working across that area of cement, and what we call is a road crossing. The dog could possibly detect odor if there's odor left behind.
So your dog can track over cement.
Following odor of human odor if
and-
it's there.
And I'm not talking about sniffing grass and then crossing the street and then reacquiring a scent. I'm talking about a dog sniffing odor down a street.
No, I do not have my dog track down the middle of a road for a long distance, if that explains what you're asking.
The reason I'm asking is because you didn't have Corsa sniff any part of this going down a street in this track, did you?
Correct.
That's because she can't do it.
I don't do tracks on cement for long distances.
Well, all right. How long of a distance are we talking about? All it takes to cross the street?
Like a short distance of like crossing a street, the dog will cross a street and continue to pick up on a track.
But not, it has not got its nose down on the street, in the street, during the track. It has to reacquire the track on the other side.
Yes, but there are instances, depending on the location of the track, where odor can be left on concrete, where the dog can still smell that odor there, but I don't train her to track down the middle of a road for a long period of time just off of odor.
Your dog was doing a lot of panting that morning, isn't that right?
Yes,
And that's not what she usually does, is it?
well, she's breathing with her mouth open.
I understand the dog has to breathe, but I'm talking about panting now.
Yes,
This dog was doing a great deal of panting throughout this whole morning, wasn't she?
yes, she was excited, and it was a warm day.
But it's unusual for her to be panting that much during a track, isn't it?
Depends on the circumstances. Every day is different. The weather's different every day. Climate conditions always play a factor into how Corsa is before she starts a track.
When Corsa pants like she was that morning, she is less effective at sniffing, isn't she?
I would say she can still smell when she is panting. It's normal for dogs to pant while they're on long searches, searching for odors, and then they will close their mouth and use their nose to detail stuff more, or once they catch an odor through their olfactory of their mouth and they want to investigate it, you'll see them close their mouth and start to use their nose. And that is a change of behavior as a canine handler that you watch for in your dog to see that change. So even though they're panting, they can still smell and detect odor.
I understand that they can still smell it, but they're not as good at it when they're panting that hard, are they?
I couldn't answer that 100% to say that, I mean, they are panting, but they can still smell.
But you've had instances where Corsa was panting and she didn't do as well in these tracking manuals, or in these tracking sheets.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yes, I guess what I'm trying to say is she can still smell while she's panting. I can't say whether I would assume that maybe, yes, it is a little bit harder for her to smell, but I can't say that she's not unable to smell.
When you're training Corsa to track a track, you know where that track begins. Isn't that right?
Wait, can you state that again?
When you're doing the training, when you're taking her out for on these training logs that you've talked about, you know where the track begins, right?
Depending on the circumstances, every training track is different.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sometimes in a training track, they will say, this is your large area to search to locate that track. It's not like here's your starting point, there's something sitting on the ground, you're going to start right here. You have to search the area to have the dog find the track.
Most of the training tracks that you took Corsa on, you knew where the start of the track was. Did you not?
Some of them, I do know where the start is. If it's a track that I lay myself, I obviously know right where it starts. If it's a track at like a canine training day and somebody else from the unit lays the track and it's unknown to me, they will give me a starting area to scan Corsa across to try to locate the track. So I don't know exactly where the track starts. I only have an area to search to try to find the start of the track.
And on many of these tracks, on these training tracks, you know the route of the track as well. Not just where it starts, but you know the directions that it goes.
If the track is unknown to me, then I don't know anything of the route of the track.
It's rare, though, in these training tracks that you don't know the route. Most of the time, you know the route. Isn't that right?
If I lay the track myself, then I know the path and the route. But if it's laid by another canine handler, then it is unknown to me exactly where they walked at.
If a dog doesn't get on the track right away, or if the dog doesn't find it, let me start over. If the dog doesn't find the track, then any other track or any other scent could be the track, right? I mean, you have to, if the dog finds the track, like Corsa, if Corsa found the track, then she could track it, right?
Correct.
If she doesn't come upon the track, she can't track it.
Correct.
And the only way she can come upon the track is if you take her in the right place.
Correct.
And even sometimes if you take her in the right place, she might miss it the first time around, right?
Correct, and that is why I allow her to scan back and forth.
All right, but if she misses it the first time on these training tracks, you bring her back around and give her another chance, right?
Well, what I would do is if I was scanning her right to left across an area and she didn't pick anything up, I would let her scan back from left to right. That way she's coming across that area from both directions, because when picking up a track for the dog, your wind direction plays a lot of factor into the odor of the track. So that way she gets to a chance to locate that odor from both directions. And that's why I allow her to scan back and forth out in front of me. I don't cross one time and then just sit there and do a circle. I allow her to go back and forth in front of where I'm at.
It didn't appear on the video that you went back over another area. It looked like you just kept going down that gravel path. It didn't look like you circled back around and let her try again.
So when I first started and I went between the vegetation and that house, there's a thin strip of grass. Corsa is working back and forth, left to right, back and forth, continuously back and forth. I'm breaking that section down as one section of the areas that I want to search. I'm letting her work out in front of me and cross back and forth to get her the most opportunity to find any odor that has crossed through that area. So that is what I'm describing as allowing her to work back and forth.
I understand that, but I'm just saying you didn't go back over an area and let her try again. You kept moving forward.
Correct, because she had gone back and forth multiple times as we worked through an area.
And you said that she only indicated on one occasion on that whole track?
She showed odor at the where Officer Brown had went over to get his viewpoint, and then towards the end when I work over towards the other side of the house, I saw the change of behavior in her when she got up by the house And then you can see she goes up to the back corner and she kind of stops. She's investigating the ground, and then she turns and starts to pull right along the back of the house. But knowing that officers had come down from that side of the house and was going right up towards the patio, that is why I tell her, good girl, and I take her away and go back over to the area leaving away from that side of the house to the wooded area.
Thank you. So on those two instances, you were assuming that she was smelling the officers.
Correct.
She could have been smelling somebody else, right?
Possibly if it was mixed in with where the officers were at.
That's happened to you before on a training track, right?
I guess I don't know what you're saying there exactly.
We'll get to it. So, I understand Corsa's a good dog. She's a great dog, right?
She's a wonderful dog.
You love your dog.
I love her. She's the greatest partner
You're
ever.
doing canine work because you love dogs.
Correct.
I assume that would be the case. I've got dogs of my own. So you know this dog very well.
Correct.
And you know what her breathing patterns are like, right? Mm-hmm. Is that a yes? I'm sorry.
Yes.
And her abilities in tracking, right?
Yes.
And you kept these training logs when she was being trained.
Yes.
Can you tell us how many times on the job, now I'm not talking about training, but in a police investigation, you've taken Corsa out in the field to track a cold track, and by that I mean a track that's 20 or 30 minutes old?
And just to clarify, are you saying this is a track on a call for an unknown subject, not a training track?
An unknown subject.
Okay.
How many times, like say a burglary or something, where somebody says, my house just got burgled, the guy ran out that way, but that was 20 or 30 minutes ago. How many times have you taken Corsa out to try to find that track?
I couldn't give you an exact number. I would have to pull like all my calls for service for attempted tracks to give you a number. I've attempted tracks before with her on those situations, and we've had success. And then there's also situations where we locate a track and we'll start to track and then it ends. And there's different varieties that I could go into detail in explaining what possibly could have happened for why the track ended.
I'm just wondering, how many times would you say, like after a call on a burglary or an assault, that happened 20 or 30 minutes ago, did you take Corsa out to try to find a track?
Like I said, I can't give you a number. I've done it several times with her.
More than 5?
Yes.
More than 10?
Maybe around there. Like I said, I can't.
Okay.
I can't give you a number because I would have to look over 3.5 years of records.
Sure. It doesn't happen very often, does it?
I don't track all the time with her, but I have had successful tracks off of calls for service.
And what percentage would you say of those kinds of circumstances would you say that Corsa was successful, meaning she caught somebody?
She caught somebody. I've had maybe 5 tracks that I have located people.
What do you mean by maybe 5?
Around there. I'm just trying to give you
But I mean,
an
now I'm not,
approximate.
and just so we understand each other, I'm not talking about somebody who's actively fleeing, because I understand that Corsa will find that person, right? Somebody who's actively fleeing from your site, you guys pull over a car, dude takes off running.
Yep.
Corsa is going to find that person, right?
If she has eyes on that person when I deploy her.
Well, you mean she can't track the odor?
I feel like you're stating one thing that's different than what you're asking from
Okay,
before.
well, that's why I want to make sure, and I am. That's why I want to make
If
sure.
the person gets out of, say, a vehicle and takes off running and she has her eyes on them right away and I deploy her, then yes. A person that leaves and then I come in and pick up the track and track, like I said, there's been successful tracks. There's been also tracks that she has picked up and say it ends at a parking lot or at a street. We don't know the outcome of that. Maybe the person had a vehicle sitting there and they got into a vehicle and drove away, and that is why the track ended.
Or they ran down the street,
Correct.
because Corsa can't track over cement.
Not for long distances.
Okay, how long can Corsa track over cement for?
Well, like I said, if the person is leaving odor, depending on your situation, If a person runs across, say, a cement parking lot, but they're up next to a building, and say that odor is trapping there next to that building, she can still track that odor along that building, and then maybe she gets to the other side of that parking lot, and she goes back to the disturbed vegetation on the ground. Obviously, running down the middle of a street from a long distance, yes, that is very hard to follow that odor, because there's nothing trapping that odor there like the ground would hold odor. So now your wind is blowing that odor all over the place. So tracking on cement for long distances is not something that I train Corsa on and do with her.
So you don't know what her success rate is for what we would call urban tracking?
For finding people, like I said, I would have to look through her records.
Are you aware that the national average for dogs performing urban tracking is 10%?
It is very low, and in a city like Cedar Rapids, it's very low because it's very difficult.
So if the success rate is only 10%, that means that 90% of the time, the dogs don't track successfully, correct?
That could be correct.
Okay. So the fact that your dog didn't find a track 30 minutes after this event occurred doesn't mean there wasn't an intruder in that house, does it?
All I can say is that my dog did not locate a track leaving that residence.
In fact, all you can say is that you didn't take the dog in the place where the track might have been laid. True?
I worked the area that I felt would be the most successful for locating a track of a person leaving the back door of that residence, and also where I could work her on fresh ground that I felt that was undisturbed.
All right.
With the fact of the call that we had to respond to the individual that was injured first, which allowed people to come up by the house. So I had to work away from that area.
I understand why you did what you did. That wasn't my question. My question was that Corsa didn't find a track because maybe you didn't take her where the track was. Is that a yes or a no?
I don't know where the track was at, so without knowing where the track was, there was nobody to say, I saw the person run over here or run that direction or run in between these two houses. Therefore, I didn't have an area to go anywhere else and say, I'm going to go search for a track across from this residence. I went off the backyard, which was the last known information from the caller stating that I believe he went out the back door, so therefore is why I searched that area.
So again, my question is that Corsa might not have found the track because you didn't take her to where the track began. Is that right?
There is a possibility.
I mean, that's an explanation, is it not?
There is a chance that there could be a track that I didn't come across because I didn't have any better information on an area to go search other than the backyard.
Well, you really only took her to the backyard area, right? You didn't start that track until after you crossed the street and you were in the neighbor's yard, right?
I started, yes, at the back of the yard over by the neighbors.
Well, it was actually, you started off going into the neighbor's yard, right?
Yes.
That's what we're watching. For a little while there, you are on the other side of that gravel path, and you're taking Corsa through the neighbor's yard, right?
Correct.
And then you drop down onto the gravel path, right?
Yes.
And that's where she alerts on that tree area.
The reason why I started where I started was knowing that Officer Brown was in that area. If somebody left that residence and were to have ran or walked up that direction towards the neighbor's house, to me, should be undisturbed area other than where the suspect fled to, since I didn't see anybody walking around that area when I showed up. Therefore is why I started with that area first. After not seeing any change of behavior in Corsa to any odor in that area, I then moved in and started checking other areas.
And before you did any of this, did you do a canvass of all the other police officers to find out where all they had been before you started Corsa off on this journey?
No, just what I knew from what I saw officers do.
And again, getting back to what we were talking about, I wonder if I could ask the state to put that map back up? Can you see it okay?
Yes.
So can you indicate, is this the house right here? Is that
Yes.
4414?
Yep.
All right. And this is the house where the Jacksons live, is that right?
Yes.
All right. So you took Corsa and you started your search up here, right?
Yes.
That's when you said Kong, right?
Not Kong.
Oh, okay. I thought you said Kong. Were you saying something?
I gave her command to track.
Okay, all right. All right. And you went this way?
Yes.
Right? Through this neighbor's yard, and then you dropped down into here where the gravel path is.
Yes.
Then you came around here, right, at the very edge of this yard, and you came back this way a little bit.
Yes. Towards the
And
house.
that's where the dog picked up this, what you thought was the scent of another officer.
Yes. Knowing that officers came down that side of the house.
You know that an officer did come around this way, right? We'll see that on another video. But
Yep.
another officer had come around this way,
Okay.
right?
I knew officers came around that side of the house. What their exact path was over, or how far out they were, I don't know. I just knew they came down that side.
All right, but that's where she smelled, right there
And-
alongside the house.
And to me, the way my angle is, it looks like you're trying to point that they came out away from the house in the wooded area and up. Is that what you're trying to describe there?
I'm sorry, I,
I-
so
I-
when you came out of the, thank you. Is that the same house? Oh, right here, okay. When you came out of that, you came down this way on this far edge of the yard, right?
Yes, checking between the wooded area and the house.
But you were on this side, you were on the very extreme left side of the house,
Yes.
in the yard. It's on the bike.
Yes, yep.
But I'm just trying to make it clear the route that you took. So you went like this, through here, down into the gravel path, down here, and back here a little ways.
Correct.
That's the only place that you had Corsa track, right?
Yes.
The Corsa can't stop in the middle of it and go, no. The track goes from here. It comes from out of here and goes this way and goes down the street this way or goes down the street this way. Corsa can't do that, right?
Correct, because there is multiple people that walk through there to handle the first portion of this call.
Not only that, you have to take her over the track.
Yes.
She has to smell it with her nose with the disturbed vegetation.
Yes.
She can't, if she's, a few feet away from a track and she hasn't sniffed it, she's not gonna know the track's back over there. She has to run over it with her nose, right?
Correct.
Like a vacuum cleaner.
Well, she can pick up that odor and then work to where exactly the track is at, depending on your wind direction. But I did not take her to that section due to the fact that multiple people had walked down that path to the back of the residence.
She's not gonna smell human odor in the air 30 minutes later, is she?
Where, on that area there? Are you talking? She could smell that odor in the air and also track. Like I stated before with our NAPWATA certifications, she has tracked a track that has sat longer than 30 minutes, 1 hour.
I maybe misunderstood me. I meant in the air, not crushed vegetation.
Oh, in the air, yeah, just odor in the air, she wouldn't be able to tell with all the other body odors that were there. There was with multiple people that were in that area. Not only that, then you had squad cars, you had an ambulance kind of in that area, so you have a lot to play in that area right there. She would not be able to walk into that area and say, hey, I smell this odor. She is not trained to scent specific odor.
If the intruder had left this way, Corsa would not have smelled it.
Correct.
And if the intruder had gone this way down the street and exited over here, Corsa wouldn't have smelled any of that.
Correct.
Thank Yeah, I'm done with that part. So getting back to Corsa certification, and you have that in front of you. Corsa wasn't actually certified in June of 2021 to do anything, was she?
She was certified. We certify once a year.
Right, and that, it lasts for a year.
Yes.
But the last time she was certified was in 2019, prior to June of 2021.
Because the year of COVID, they waived certifications.
I understand, but if it only lasts a year, then she wasn't actually certified on that date.
Typically, on a routine basis, our K-9 unit does certification testing once a year, every year. However, due to the uncontrollable circumstances, we were not able to do a certification.
And yet, you could have done an in-house one, not a certification, but you could have taken the course through all the same sorts of tests that they do for certification. You could have done it in-house in Cedar Rapids, right?
I would say that we do stuff that's pretty similar and close to that in our everyday K-9 unit training.
Okay. And Corsa is also certified in explosive detection, right?
Yes,
Now, would that include gunpowder?
yes,
So Corsa is trained to sniff out and smell like when a firearm has been fired.
yes.
She can smell that in the air.
She could smell the odor on, like, say, spent casings. They were like on the ground, she would be able to smell that.
And Corsa would have smelled that very smell that morning in the house, right?
I wasn't deploying her to smell for explosives, and I never deployed her out from me. I kept her at my side.
I understand that, but if the gun had been fired in that house, the gunpowder would drop down to the floor. Corsa would smell that.
Not, I guess, I can't say that she couldn't smell it, but I wasn't telling her to go smell for it, to locate it.
Understood, but she would smell it nonetheless.
I guess you'd have to say I think so, but I wasn't preparing her for a search for odors. I was taking her at my side to clear the residence and have her there if she were to be needed for contact with an intruder.
So how do you prepare differently for an explosive smell?
Everything is different. As I stated earlier, we have a routine for tracking. You let her out, see if she needs to go to the bathroom. I put a harness on her. I walk her over, I off her. I switch the leash to her harness. To go search for a person in a building is totally different. If she's going to go out and search for me on an area search, she has 2 collars that she wears. One collar, that's where the leash is hooked if she's searching for a man out in an open area. If she's searching for explosive odors, her leash is hooked to a different collar, and I bring her into the area where I'm going to start the search. I place her into a sit instead of have her lay down, so she's sitting, and then I have a whole separate command that I give her to go search for explosive odors.
Have you ever, when training Corsa, had put her in an area where she could smell explosives and then asked her to track something?
Yes, there are times where we do training, and our last certification that we did last fall was also areas, we had a scenario where the dog will go in and maybe search a building for explosive odors, and then I'll take a ride out and I'll transition her into searching for a track or doing a building search. I may do a track and then bring her in and have her do explosive detection.
So you're saying that you did that in a training exercise, that you had her smell for explosives and then took her directly out for a track?
We have done scenarios like that where we have them do one venue and then they go right into a different venue.
No, but I mean that one.
That,
Where you had her go, where you took her into somewhere to smell for explosives and then you took her directly out for a track. You're saying you did that with her?
we have done that in training.
Now, going back to this panting that we saw on the video, Corsa doesn't normally pant like that when you do a track, does she?
Not all the time.
In fact, she's a quiet breather, isn't she?
When you get her out of the car, she's loud because she's excited.
Okay. Well, turning your attention to a track log back from May 31st of 2019, you said Corsa did a great job with this track. She does a great job keeping her nose down and staying with the odor. As a handler, I'm able to read her on-ramps a lot easier. I am also able to focus on her body movements. One thing I need to work on is trying to listen to her breathing, as it is very quiet and I have a hard time hearing her breathing.
That is a situation on a different day than this event where maybe it wasn't as hot or maybe it wasn't as humid, so maybe she wasn't breathing as hard when I had her tracking.
Well, you wrote, this was you writing this, right?
And you also have to realize that she just went into the house and had a lot of excitement in the house, and then I bring her out to the track. Maybe before that training situation that you're reading right now, maybe she just wasn't in another scenario right before that.
But my question was, you wrote this, right?
Yes.
And you wrote it back on May 31st of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And you described your dog as a quiet breather.
Yes, in that training scenario, she was a quiet breather, and I was saying that trying to listen to her breathing as she was tracking is something that it was hard to hear her breathing on that track.
You said she is very quiet, and I have a hard time hearing her breathing. That's what
Yes.
you wrote. You didn't say on this track, you said she is a quiet breather.
She is a quiet breather, but every situation is different. Like I stated, every track's different, every training day's different, every training opportunity is different. Depends on the day where she could be breathing differently due to the climates and what all she has done before. So going off that, I was talking about her breathing that day in that training. My notes were for that training log.
Well, by reading it, it appears that you're describing your dog as a quiet breather.
At times she is, and then there's times where she is a little bit louder.
All right. And that's maybe when she's hot, or it's humid, or she's uncomfortable.
Correct.
Then she's a louder breather.
Yes, if it's humid out, she will breathe louder.
On another track, on June 3rd of 2019, you wrote, and I think this is a misspelling, I messed the start of this track up by not walking back and forth enough. Remember writing that?
That would have been back during the initial training school when she was brand new and I was first teaching her how to track. And that is most likely that I pointed that comment out as a handler. That is something that I probably did, was I didn't allow her to search my given start area well enough.
You said I missed, I think you meant missed the start, right? Not messed. I think you wrote, I missed the start of this track. Oh, no, you said, okay, I withdraw that. I messed the start of this track up by not walking back and forth enough. Right?
Correct. So what I'm doing is I'm stating that as a handler, I made the mistake. I didn't allow my dog to be productive enough in an area where maybe I didn't allow her to check that area enough. So I'm saying that due to that situation, it's my fault. Not the dog's fault, it was my fault.
Gotcha, but you've been doing that for 10 years at this point, right?
Correct.
So you're a very experienced handler back in 2019.
Yes.
So even experienced handlers can make a mistake
Yes,
and miss the start of a track,
we are humans and we're not perfect.
right? And not trying to beat you up about it, I'm just saying that's what happens, right?
Absolutely.
And the reason you knew you missed the start of that track is because you knew where that track started.
I can't recall if I was given the start location or not on that track. Being that it was a brand new dog in training, there is a good chance that maybe it was like, hey, here's where your track starts, and I was working that area. But I can't answer for sure that I knew where the start was on that one.
If I showed it to you, would it refresh your recollection?
I could take a look at it.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
What would be a good identification exhibit number for me or letter to use, Your Honor?
mean, are you wanting to offer this as an exhibit?
I'm not at this point, but I just want the record clear what I'm approaching it with, so. I'll just go identification I1. Does that work?
It works for me.
I'm going to hand you, officer, what's been marked as defendant's exhibit I1. And it's this one that starts, I've highlighted right there. If you want to take a minute and read that.
So looking at this being June 3rd of 2019, I would have only been working her for approximately 3 to 4 weeks. So this is a brand-new training. This is training her. Even though I'm an experienced handler, this is a whole new dog. Corsa has way different cues and behaviors than what Narco had. So I'm still learning her.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you, but does that refresh your recollection about this particular one? Because I don't want it to stand.
Yeah, yep. So I was just trying to describe it if you wanted.
Thank you. Does that refresh your recollection about that one?
I can get an idea of maybe what took place, but I can't recall the exact moment of that training.
And would you be able to recall whether or not you knew the direction of that track?
I don't recall if I know where the exact track was at.
But you had to at least know where the track started.
And I was at least given an area of where to start.
Well, you said you messed up on the start of this track by not walking back and forth enough at the start to allow Corsa to find the track on her own.
So what I probably did was I had my area that was most likely given to me by Officer Schumann, who was the trainer, and I walked Corsa through that area and probably struggled to find the beginning of that track, being that this was new to her. And then as a training, then we realized that, she didn't locate it. And then maybe Officer Schumann said, okay, focus on this or work this area again. And I worked her again, and she located the track then and started, because the remainder of my notes that go on in that training in that training session go on to state that once she did locate the track, she did very well. She then stopped and went to the bathroom, and we then restarted to locate and continue on the track. And then I state that I missed a few miscues of her with her head movements when relocating the track and going, but once I realized that she was back on the track and going, then she did a good job. And that was my overall complete notes.
All right, Mr. Johnson, I'm going to stop you from any more questions. At this point, we're going to take a afternoon recess, so I've got a couple minutes after 3. So again, these clocks aren't right, but we'll take a 15-minute recess. And ladies and gentlemen, I just remind you of the admonitions that I've given you previously.
All right.
Officer Buckles, you can step down. Does anybody need anything at this point? I have, this is off the record, I have 1 and 6. I don't have 2 yet. Okay. There's 6.
Excuse me.
Council, are you all ready? Okay.
She said, had mentioned. Okay, what's your email? Can I get your email?
Okay, Officer Buckles, I think your microphone is off. And sir, I would just remind you again, I'm not going to re-swear you in every time we take a break. I'm just going to remind you that you are still under oath.
Yes.
And just sure you all remember it wasn't very long, but Mr. Johnson was asking questions of Officer Buckles, and we'll continue with that. So, Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Buckles, 15 days after you were out at the Oakleaf Court on that date, the date of the incident in question, 15 days later, you were on Jones Golf Course doing a track with Corsa, and you made the comment, with the heat and humidity, Corsa didn't act like herself. She was able to run this track and get from the start to the finish pretty well. However, she did a lot of casting back and forth across the track for the majority of it. Usually she is nose down and right on it. You remember making those comments?
Could call, briefly, thinking of it, that what I was describing there was that usually when she tracks, she's nose down, she's staying right with the odor. But again, a lot of things come into play with your wind and your environment when a dog runs a track, whether they're right on the track, footstep for footstep, they could be with the track, but over a couple feet because of the wind direction. And that day, off the notes that you just read, with the humidity that she was casting back and forth, whether it was because of the wind or what it was, I was just stating that she was still tracking, she just wasn't giving me her normal behaviors of straight on the track, pulling straight. She was just more working it back and forth.
But you said with the heat and the humidity, Corsa didn't act like herself. That's what you wrote.
Probably feeling that because of those conditions is maybe what was causing her to not be herself and track the exact way that she usually tracks.
Because she was doing all this casting back and forth.
Yes.
But you, again, knew the track direction. You knew the track she was supposed to be on.
Being what I'm recalling, that we were at Jones Park, I would assume that that was a canine training day where our entire canine unit was there. So therefore, I most likely would not have known the track. When we train as a unit, we will lay tracks for each other, but when we come up to run the track, we don't know where that track is at.
When you say she did a lot of casting back and forth across the track, that makes it sound like you knew where the track was.
Well, if another handler lays the track for me, and then when I go to run the track, they walk with me so that they can see what the dog does, and since they know where the track's at. So then they can also give notes to me or say, hey, your dog struggled here or did very well here, or, the track was right here. Your dog did a great job of picking the track up, staying right on the track, or, with the wind direction here, the dog was tracking 3 feet over approximately. So that could have been knowing that she was going back and forth. I observed that behavior in her, and knew that when she's casting back and forth a couple feet width, that in dog training that you see when I observe other dogs track or seeing dogs track is that they're working the odor, they're just not working the odor footstep for footstep. Therefore is why she was casting back and forth, and then the person who laid the track was probably could have said, yes, she was not footstep for footstep, she was, cutting back and forth with the wind.
On July 6th of 2021, a few days later, you wrote, and this was on an explosive search, Corsa was worked off leash in each of these venue areas. With the very hot weather, she was panting from the start. Therefore, she wasn't sniffing and detailing stuff on her own as usual. You remember writing that?
Could be correct for that training day.
Well, what do you mean could be correct? You wrote that, right?
Yes, I can't recall. I guess what I'm trying to say is I can't recall the exact day, like I can't picture it in my mind, but going off of those notes, that would be my correct notes for that training day.
I mean, I can show them to you if you have a doubt about what I read
No,
you.
I believe you. My answer was that I can't recall that exact, picture of it, but if that's the notes that I put for that training day, then that is what I observed and we encountered.
So once again, there's an example of hot weather and her panting impairing her ability to sniff as well.
Yes, hot weather does play a factor into dogs working, especially if they work for long periods of time.
And panting.
Correct.
Panting affects her ability to sniff as well.
She can still smell, but yes, it probably affects her, her not smelling as well.
Okay, thank you. And then on another entry on July 25th of I'm back to 2019 now, at Hawkeye Downs, Corsa did great tracking on the grass. I allowed her to work the area and take her time on the road crossing to figure it out. I gave her a little assistance, taking her to the other side of the road after she checked the area before crossing. Once we crossed, I let her work on her own to relocate the track. I was happy with her overall performance. You wrote that, right?
So yes, that would probably be that she came up to a road crossing and she started checking to the left and checking to the right, and I wasn't seeing her pick anything up, but she was still searching those areas trying to find the continuation of the track. And so being that she was once again a newer dog at that time, and all these different environments and trainings or tracks are new to her, I then took her across the street and scanned her to pick up the track to teach her that, hey, when you track, you come up to a change of, ground, whether it's pavement or rock, the track can continue across, it can go out to the side. So I was just trying to help her in a training to teach her.
That was just another example of the fact that she can't track over cement, right? She has to relocate the track on the other side of the road.
I would say in a roadway, correct, because it's so wide open that it wouldn't hold odor on the roadway.
Right, so it's not a matter of she can do it for a little ways. She loses the track when she hits the cement, and she has to reacquire it on the other side.
Yes, the odor's not going to be as strong on the cement, and but like I said, every environment's different where she could have odor, but most likely, yes, she crosses and reacquires the disturbed vegetation on the other side.
And then there was another entry on June 13th of 2019, and you remarked on this one, this was an unknown track. So when you do have an unknown track, you put that in your report, that's an unknown track, right?
That entry I put in there, but I don't always put that in there in notes. Like I stated earlier, if it's a track on a training day where our entire canine unit is there, majority of the time, another handler lays the track for me. If I'm working the street, sometimes I will go out and lay a track myself to allow her a rep of tracking. And due to the fact that I'm working the street, I can't always have other people lay the tracks. But if it was on a canine training day, then yes, we lay tracks for each other.
Officer Buckles, the vast majority of these training tracks, you know the track. Isn't that true?
Sorry, I can't hear
The
you.
vast majority of these training tracks, you know where the track is and you know where the track goes.
No, I do not.
Okay.
If it's a canine training day and somebody else lays the track for me, I do not stand there and watch where the track goes. They don't tell me where the track is. They lay the track, and then when I'm ready to run the track, they give me my start area. A lot of times, a handler will be laying a track for Corsa and myself, and I'll be off in a different area laying a track for their dog, and then we'll run each other's tracks.
And this is going on this one. My starting area was right where I had walked through previous on my way out from laying an earlier track for another dog. Corsa caught my out path and began tracking that. Amy told me I wasn't on the actual track laid by Cody. I then worked Corsa throughout the area and she located the actual track and did a great job. This just shows, again, that she can't even distinguish your tracks from somebody else's tracks.
So in that situation would be that, Cody started my track. I laid a track most likely for Cody. And when I was coming back out, I didn't know where Cody started. So it just happened to be that where I walked back out was in the area of where Cody started. So when I first initially started the scan of my track, I sent Corsa out into an area that I was given to have her try to locate the track. She came across the odor of the track of me coming back out and picked that odor up. Therefore, she started to follow that track because she couldn't tell whether it's going, which direction. She's just following the path. She didn't know that that was my out path. And then Amy would have said, hey, she has picked up your out path track because you came out where Cody started. So I took her away from it and went and scanned her in another area, and Corsa would have scanned that area and then picked up the track that Cody laid, and then she started tracking, and then Amy would have said, okay, she is on the track now that is laid by Cody.
Yeah, that's what I just read to you. But
So
my question was that she can't distinguish your track from anybody else's track. Isn't that correct?
I guess I was misunderstanding what you were saying. She's picking up a track is what she was doing.
And my question was, she can't distinguish your track from anyone else's track.
I guess
She'll track you even though you're handling her. She'll track your track.
correct.
Okay. And in this particular instance, again, is another example of the fact that she can't track over brick. You wrote, during this track, she crossed a brick patio and did a great job locating the track on the other side.
Yes, she came up on so she would have tracked up to the brick patio, worked her way across that brick patio. Whether she was still smelling human odor across that brick patio, she's still sniffing and working her way across the brick patio. And then she gets to the other side, and she is now smelling what I would assume would be grass that's around the brick patio. And then that's where I see her bury her nose down into the grass and continue tracking on.
Right. That's why you wrote it the way you did. She wasn't nose down over the brick patio. She reacquired the track on the other side of the brick patio.
Correct.
Isn't that right?
Correct,
Okay.
because odor doesn't hold as well on hard surfaces like cement or brick.
Again, on October 18th of 2021, you wrote on a track, the Corsa was started away, and I don't need you to tell me about the whole track again. Try to listen to my question, okay? And then you can answer it however you want. But prefer if you didn't just repeat the whole thing again, because I'll have a question after I read this, okay?
Okay.
Corsa was started away from the area of the start to make her search for a bit. She picked the odor up as she was working parallel with the track. Once she picked this odor up, she had a head snap and worked over to the track. Once she hit the track, she was locked on it and pulling hard. She tracked really well up to the road crossing. Once she crossed the road, it took her a few minutes to catch the track with the offset of the road crossing. Once she located it, she went right back to nose down. Right? That's what you wrote.
Correct.
And that's another example of her not being able to track over cement.
And that's what I stated earlier, was that over cement, it does not hold odor, so she is not going to track footstep for footstep on hard surfaces.
On June 15th of 2022, you wrote, once again, Corsa started out searching hard, and then after a few minutes of searching and not having found the track, she started to not search as hard. I continued to work with her, and finally she picked up the track. Once she got going, she did a good job working the track for the heat and sunny conditions.
Yes, with sunny conditions, the sun will dissipate odor faster than a cloudy day or during the night. Therefore, maybe with the sun, it made the odor harder to detect. Maybe, obviously, she was hotter, so maybe it was making it harder for her to breathe. You know, and depending on that exact circumstance for how long she was searching for the start area. So I don't always start her right in the area. I'll start her off to the side so she has to search, and then come to an area where the start of the track is, so that she doesn't learn that I always find the track right where I get started at. Like, that she knows she has to go out and keep searching until she finds that track.
So in other words, this is another example of an incident where Corsa has difficulty in the heat finding a track, in the heat and sunny conditions, correct?
Yes, heat does take a factor on dogs, and it can make things more difficult for them.
Corsa, and the next entry on June 15th of 2022, which would be the same time of year, the same day, actually on a different year, the next year, Corsa still needs work on learning that she may have to search for a long time to find a track and not to give up if not finding it within the first few minutes. Some tracks she did good on once she found the track, and some she struggled since it was so hot. That's what you wrote, right?
Yes.
Then there's another entry on June 10th of 2019. This is at Seminole Valley Park. You wrote, Corsa did a good job locating the start of the track. Right at the beginning, she stopped and was sniffing a tree stump. I figured she was messing around, and I pulled her off of it. Later found out that Bargain stepped on the tree stump. I think it says Bargain, maybe it's Bergen. Stepped on the tree stump when laying the track. Corsa relocated the track and moved on. Corsa went past a right-hand turn because of the strong winds. Once she was out of the odor, we had to work backwards a ways until she located the turn and then followed it until the end of the track. That's what you wrote, right?
Correct.
And that was another example of you pulling off of a scent that she found, thinking that it was something else,
Again,
when it was actually the track she was supposed to be on.
Yep. Again, that would have been that she was a brand new dog. She was still in the training school. I'm still learning her. It's very common for dogs to want to pee on things. You take your dog for a walk down the street, they want to pee on things. So dogs, when you're trying to track and they're new and they're still getting the concept of tracking, they will want to explore, investigate, smell things, and pee on things. So when she started the track in grass and got up to this tree stump and she stopped to smell it, in my mind, I made the mistake as a handler saying, she may be trying to stop smelling this, she may try to pee. So to correct that, to keep her from doing that, so she doesn't learn that behavior from the beginning and thinks she can get away with it, I pulled her away from the stump to keep her from doing that, and then wanted her to search and find, or continue on with the track. Then Officer Schumann said, after the track and you talk about what happened, what was good, what was bad, she said to me, "You remember when Corsa stopped and smelled this tree stump? You took her away from it." Well, Officer Bergen, who was the canine handler who laid the track for me, she said he actually stepped on that tree stump when laying the track. So it was a learning thing for me, but it was my mistake of pulling her away. But even though I took her away from that tree stump that had Officer Bergen's odor on it, I was still able to restart her and have her reacquire that track.
Because you restarted her,
Yes.
because you went back.
Well, I wouldn't have gone back to the area that had already been searched because we had all already walked through there walking with Corsa. What I would have done is worked areas out where I knew that we had not already walked as a group of us, allowing her to search fresh area to find the continuation of the track.
Thank you. On June 14th of 2022, you wrote, "It was very hot and Corsa appeared to get hot and tired very fast. On her tracks, Dave would give a large area to have the canine search for the start of the track. Corsa seemed to struggle with this. I feel her problems was that she would search right away and has never had to search such a large area or for such a long time to find a track, so she would give up searching hard after a period of time, like she felt as if we were out for a walk. She did end up finding the starts and was able to complete these tracks, but finding the start took some work, and she needed to be walked back and forth in the area of the start until she finally caught the odor and started tracking."
Yes, dogs are not perfect. They're just like humans. And so seeing that she was out searching for a track, she started to get tired, giving up. Not so much giving up, but it was, she was starting to lose focus. That is something as a handler that I see, and then I start to realize, hey, I need to start making her search areas even longer, changing it up. Sometimes she may find a track right away. Sometimes she may need to search for a while. Therefore, I see that in her, so that I know as a handler that I need to start her a long ways away from a track and make her search for a long time, so that I can train her and let her know that sometimes she does have to search for a very long time before finding that track.
When you know there's a track and she hasn't picked up the scent, then you will work a long time for her to find that track, will you not?
Can you state that again? I didn't quite
When you're
understand you.
When you're on a training exercise and you know there's a track and she's not picking up on it, you will work a long time for her to find that track, would you not?
Correct.
But on this particular incident, where you don't know if there's a track or not, you didn't work very hard to find one on June 15th, did you?
I worked Corsa on the area of the best knowledge that I had of the intruder leaving out the back door. So therefore, the backyard was the best area to start. And obviously, a dog can only work for so long before they get tired. And with the heat, there's no way that I could have went out and searched that whole entire neighborhood.
You had her tracking for a total of less than 10 minutes.
Around there, searching the area that I felt was most productive to pick up a track leaving that residence.
I get that, but even that track was less than 10 minutes long.
That's the time that it took me to cover the area that I felt at the time was the most productive area to search.
That's not working very hard, is it?
For a dog, it is when they're constantly sniffing.
You would agree, though, that you're going to work harder to find a track that you know exists than to find a track that you don't know whether it exists or not.
Well, on the training track, knowing that, yes, there was a track there, was allowing her to work through her struggles to learn that if she keeps working, she will, to see, will she eventually pick up this track? Whether it's maybe in that situation, I just wasn't getting her in productive areas. Maybe she needed to get into a different area to pick up the track. Maybe it was like sunny out where a lot of the odor had dissipated, and maybe the ground that she was on, maybe it was very short grass and there wasn't a lot of odor there. And then maybe she got to an area that had a little bit more thicker grass, longer grass, something to that terms where maybe she would have picked up the odor there because there's a little bit more odor in the taller grass. Without knowing the exact training session to know exactly what it was, other than just saying that she did have to search for a while, but I allowed her to work through it and continue, and then she was able to pick the track up.
So is your testimony then that 10 minutes is enough time for Corsa to get too tired to want to search anymore?
The second part of that, or the second half of that question, I didn't really understand you.
So is it your testimony that 10 minutes is a long enough time for Corsa to get tired and not want to search anymore?
10 minutes is what it took me to walk her through the backyard of that residence, again, off the information I had, and I felt that she made multiple scanning paths back and forth and covered a lot of area in that backyard to attempt to pick up odor of a subject leaving, and that's how long it took. And once we completed that area, I felt that I had searched the most productive area to attempt to pick up a track, and that is when I allowed her to rest. And yes, she was tired from searching at that point, and I didn't pick up a track in that productive area, so that's where I ended it.
So my question was, are you saying that 10 minutes is a long enough time for Corsa to get tired and not want to search anymore? Is that a yes or a no?
Every day is different.
So on this day, on June 15th, and 10 minutes is generous. I don't think it was 10 minutes. That was long enough. On that day, what we saw was long enough for Corsa to get tired and not want to search anymore.
She was tired. I mean, you can see that, obviously she's hot when I lay her down, and she's at that point, she's no longer searching when I tell her to lay down. She's free to just lay there and be a dog and relax. So if she wants to pant as hard as she wants to pant and try to get all that air in to cool her body down, she can do so. And you do see that in the camera where she is panting and breathing very hard at that point. It's just, I made the decision at that point that I felt that I had covered the most productive area to have her find the track of a person leaving this residence. After, it just happened to be that it was approximately 10 minutes. After that 10 minutes, I could have went out and asked her to try to search more for a track, but I did not do that because I felt that I covered the most productive area.
So your testimony is that your dog was tired.
Well, it was a warm day and she was warm. You can see that she's panting. I'm not saying that, obviously she's a little tired. She's been working, but I'm not saying that she was so tired that if I would have went and searched other areas that she wouldn't have been able to find a track. I just wasn't picking up anything in that productive area.
Now, I know as a dog lover, when you left Corsa in the car, you had the air conditioning going.
Yes,
The car was running.
yes.
Isn't it true your dog is panting the second she comes out of that car?
She is excited when she comes out, and yes, she comes out from a car into humidity, and she is panting, but that is another part of when I allow her to just roam around and give her an opportunity to break, is she is having a few minutes to transition from the temperature in the squad car to the temperature outside and get that transition of that heat or humidity to her body before I ask her to go search.
But your dog, and I'll restate my question, your dog was panting the second she came out of that car. Yes or no?
Yes,
Okay. And so that wasn't because she was hot.
correct.
All right. And she continued to pant throughout the whole time that you had her outside that car.
On that day, she did, yes.
And that was unusual for her.
Yes, she was excited, and when she is excited, she will pant.
Did Officer Schumann train you and K9 Corsa as a service dog team?
Yes.
All right. And how many K9 teams had she trained before she trained you?
So she had, she was on her second dog as a canine handler and completed a 12-week school to be a certified trainer. I don't know how many handlers and dogs she helped train during those 12 weeks while at that school, but then once she completed that school, training myself and Corsa along with the other two handlers and dogs were the first in-house dogs that she trained in our department.
So how many K9 teams had she trained before she trained you?
Like I said, I don't have an exact number for how many she trained while she was out at the trainer school.
If you know, how long had she been a dog handler?
I can't remember how many years. She worked a dog, the dog got injured, had to retire it, and she got another dog to replace that dog. So I would say maybe between 6 years.
If you know, how long has she been a trained canine instructor?
Sorry, how long she has been?
Yeah. At the time of this incident,
So
how
at the-
long had she been?
At the time of the incident of June 15th of 21.
Yes.
So she would have completed the 12-week handler training school, the instructor training school in the early spring of 2019, where she graduated in April of 2019. So her start date would have been somewhere around 12 weeks before that. And then when she came back is when she started to immediately train myself and Corsa and the other the other two dogs.
So how long was her instructor training?
It was, I believe, 12 weeks.
Okay. And how many tracking dogs had Officer Schumann trained before you and Corsa?
How many ever were in that school that she went through for 12 weeks? And I don't have a number on that.
How many weeks was your initial training with Canine Corsa?
The 4 weeks where I assisted Officer Schumann in teaching and imprinting the dogs on odors, tracking and bite work, and then another 8-week school after that with where Officer Bergen and Varai joined us. So 12 weeks total.
Was that training 5 days a week?
Yes.
How many hours per day was the actual training?
We'd usually do a 8-hour day, but every day was different, depending on what we were doing, whether the day went a little bit longer or we ended after 8 hours.
Is Corsa trained in obedience?
Yes,
To sit
yes,
and lay down
yes,
and stand?
yes.
To heel on both left and right side?
To heel at my left side.
Did you perform obedience training on your own at home or under the supervision of the canine trainer?
I have done obedience training with Corsa while at work during canine schools at canine training days. And then, when I'm at home with her, just in the backyard, there's times where I'll work just simple obedience with her.
Is Corsa trained in agility to jump fences?
It's part of the training that we will do at, we have obstacle courses, or while we're out doing a training scenario, if we encounter a fence, then yes, I would have her jump over it as part of a training.
And the broad jump, is she trained in that?
Sorry, what was that?
It's a broad jump?
To what?
Broad, B-R-O-U.
Broad?
B-R-O-A-D,
To
jump?
just jump?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she can jump.
Is she trained to jump?
I don't have her jump distances.
Okay.
She has no need in her job to be able to jump a certain distance.
Is Corsa trained in evidence recovery?
She is not trained in article recovery, which you would classify as evidence. She is trained in the explosive odors, so the only area of evidence recovery that she would be trained in is locating spent shell casings or a firearm that had just been fired.
So she's not trained to retrieve the evidence, to pick it up and bring it back to you?
Correct.
Is she trained to preserve the forensic value of the item she finds? But she obviously isn't, because you just told us that she doesn't.
Yep, she's not trained on article items.
When you do you use article training? Is that part of her training, an article to find something?
No, since she's not trained on articles, I don't use, I use like her toy.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that rest of
I
that.
guess I use her toy if that's what you're asking.
All right, and so do you utilize any item in training, like a gun or a knife or a wallet?
No,
Any item with human scent placed on it prior to being placed or tossed into a specific search area?
no,
Is Corsa trained in drug detection?
no,
Is Corsa trained to, you already told us she's trained to detect explosive odors, I don't know why I can't say that today. What's the difference between tracking and trailing?
Tracking, I would describe as a dog that is smelling disturbed vegetation on the ground. Trailing would be more just like a dog that puts their nose up in the air and is just following odor.
So is that more like when they're in hot pursuit of someone?
No, I'd say it's just a different style of tracking where dogs can be trained in trailing odor rather than tracking odor. My dog is trained in tracking.
Okay, so there is a way to have your dog trained in detecting human odor in the air.
Correct, yes. I'm sure that there are dogs out there that are trained that way.
But Corsa isn't trained that way.
Correct.
Do you know how many police service dogs there are in the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
We have 7 dogs on our canine unit.
And how many of those are trained in explosive detection?
Corsa is the only dog of 7 that is trained on explosives.
How many of them are trained in trailing?
0. All of our dogs are trained in tracking.
And how many of those dogs do you have that are trained in tracking?
7.
Okay. During your basic handler training, prior to the day of this incident, were you given research documents concerning tracking or trailing?
Given documents like educational documents or?
Documents about research, like I told you, like remember when we talked about only 10% of urban tracks are successful? Were you given any sorts of research to that effect?
I wasn't given like actual documents in the training school, but just different training like seminars that I've went to. There have been speakers at different seminars that have talked about tracking and success rates. They have stated that yes, tracking in a urban environment is a lot harder than tracking in a rural environment, and that yes, there is due to the difficulties in a big city that you have a lot of vehicle traffic, foot traffic. There is a lower success rate.
But what they're calling urban tracking is what you were doing on June 15th of 2021. That's urban tracking.
It is an urban area, but the yard and the wooded area out back of this residence wasn't a spot that has a lot of foot traffic or that you would be able to assume has a lot of foot traffic. When I state more urban area, I'm talking like downtown Cedar Rapids where there's a lot of close streets, a lot of parking lots, a lot of buildings, and a lot of foot traffic.
But the data on urban tracking refers to towns, cities. It doesn't refer to just the downtown area. It refers to the residential areas as well, does it not?
Correct, but what I'm stating is in the area of this house and its location, and where the size of the yards, even being a nicer neighborhood, there wasn't a lot of what I would call distractors. It's not an area where I would say there's a good chance that there's been a lot of foot traffic of people in this neighborhood that have maybe walked through this area.
You testified on direct that when people walk, human scent falls off of them. You remember talking about that?
Yes.
That it's not just crushed vegetation, that human scent falls down off of them, and the dog can track that as well.
It's a portion of tracking through my learning and education conferences that I've gone through over all the years of being a canine handler. They have talked about how your dog is tracking the disturbed vegetation. However, your body is losing odor. You do shed skin cells, and that odor does drop down to the ground where along the area of the disturbed vegetation. So your dog is tracking the disturbed vegetation, but they still smell some of that human odor with the disturbed vegetation. So for instance, when I explained earlier on the tracking, and we place a cross track on our track, when the dog gets to that cross track, if they were to check out that cross track, hopefully they can determine and say, yep, there's disturbed vegetation here, but it's not the same odor as what I have been tracking along this disturbed vegetation, and they continue on with the track that they were on.
So can you provide the scientific evidence that human scent is falling off of a human in these tracks?
I don't have scientific facts. I'm just going off of the training that I have received both in the two canine schools that I went through, one with Narco and the one with Amy, and then the different conferences that I've attended over the years.
Can you tell us how many times Corsa has been trained to track over crushed rock or gravel?
So
I just want to know, can you tell us the number of times?
I can't say a number of times. It's just one of those where it depends on what environments we are tracking over when we're training.
Can you give us a ballpark figure?
I don't specifically go and say track from point A to point B on cement, but if she is tracking and the person laying the track comes across an area of cement, an area of rock, gravel, mud, whatever it might be, that person will still walk across those different surfaces, where Corsa will then encounter those surfaces and have to work through them to follow the disturbed vegetation and the odor.
If it were true what you say, that human scent is falling off of us at any given time, then dogs ought to be able to track over cement and brick patios.
There are dogs that do train scent specific. Maybe depending on the environment they work, that there is a lot of cement in the downtown area. I do know different canine handlers that I've spoke to from other agencies at different conferences and canine venues where they do a lot of that training because of the amount of cement that they have. However, I don't focus on just tracking on cement with Corsa. She does encounter those areas, but not specific to just being able to do an entire track on cement.
Well, not only do you not focus on it, she doesn't do it. She doesn't track on concrete. She doesn't track on brick.
She's not trained to track on concrete.
Have you ever heard of the Karl Schorster experiments?
No.
I mean, didn't the Germans prove that human scent does not fall off of humans onto the ground when dogs are searching for crushed vegetation?
I don't know anything about that incident that you're talking about to be able to relate to it.
Going back to your testimony about being in the house before you deployed Corsa for the track, you remember when Mr. Scheer asked you those questions?
Yes.
How long were you in that house for?
A time frame, I don't know. I would have to refer to my body camera to get the time that I entered to the time I exited.
So the body camera would be an accurate reflection of how long you were in that house for?
Yes,
And you weren't there to search the house?
correct.
You weren't there to document what things had been moved or what things had not been moved, right?
Correct.
That wasn't your job.
Correct.
First of all, you were just trying to stay alive, right?
My initial entrance to the residence and clearing the residence, officer safety was our first priority of clearing the residence.
And I didn't mean to say that to make you sound selfish, but that's part of the job that you have to worry about, right?
Yes,
Is you have to protect yourself
yes,
and the other officers.
yes,
And then you have to go give aid to anybody else that's injured.
correct.
That would be priority number 2,
Yes,
right? And then you got your dog to worry about.
yes,
And then you were clearing that house, right?
yes.
And then you left, shortly after that, you left the house.
To place Corsa back in the car.
Now, we didn't see the entire video of your search. There's another 5 minutes at the end of that video, and I know your search was over, and that's why Mr. Scheer stopped the video. But there's another solid 5 minutes of your dog just laying there panting like crazy, right?
After I was complete with the search?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you disagree with that?
I'm sure she was panting as she was before that we saw in the video. She had been searching, and like I said, I was, right by her, so you're going to see and hear her very well on my body camera. breathing and panting.
Right, but she's in front of you now. She's not like right behind you or right next to your body cam. She's well in front of you. And you can hear her panting, and she's panting very hard.
Are you talking about when I was still in the backyard of the residence?
Yes.
Yes,
You're
yep.
just sitting there?
I was squatted down in front of her, petting her.
Just give me a second.
Nope, you're
I'm
fine.
almost done here. Thank you. I don't have any further questions. Thank you, officer.
Any redirect, Mr. Scheer?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll let you get a drink there, Officer Buckles.
Thanks.
You good?
Yep.
All right. Can you remind us again, how long have you been a K-9 officer?
Almost 14 years.
And you have been with Corsa since 2019?
Yes, May of 2019 is, I got her the last week of April, so we started training May of 2019.
So a lot of those training logs that Mr. Johnson was talking to you about with issues in 2019, that was time when you and Corsa were learning how to work together.
Yes, and it was during that initial 12-week school where she was learning to track.
Because every K-9 is different and unique, would you agree?
Correct.
So even though you had a prior K-9 partner, Narco, for almost 10 years, you still had to learn how to work with Corsa. Is that safe to say?
Yes.
I want to just kind of show some dates as well with that training log that Mr. Johnston was referring to. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
And we talked a lot about some dates from 2019, 2022. I just kind of want to focus on the time frame near of June 15th, 2021, okay? Mm-hmm. And so, looking in front of you on the date of May 21st, 2021, I'll give Mr. Johnston time to look it up. Can you just tell me what your notes say on that track?
Corsa did a great job searching for the start of the track. Once she hit it, she was locked on it. Very good footstep for footstep track. Road crossings were very well done also. This track covered wet grass, dirt, and concrete.
Can you tell me what your notes are for the track of May 31st, 2021?
Corsa did a great job locating the start of the track. She was right on the track the entire time. Great overall performance.
How about the notes for the track on June 4th, 2021?
Corsa was started about 40 yards from the start of the track. She did a good job locating the start. Worked the track very well. At one point, we had to stop mid-track and wait a few minutes for a lady and her dog to walk by on the gravel road where the where the track crossed the road. She did a good job working all directions to locate the continuation of the track. Overall, very good track.
Can you give me the notes of the track on June 7th, 2021?
Corsa was started in a blank area to search for a little bit before going to the small area where the track started. Once she got to the area and located the track, it was an immediate road crossing. She did very well with this. After the road crossing, she was right on the track for the remainder. At the basketball court, she lost odor at the cement. She turned and worked the grass along the edge until she got the other side and relocated, continuing the track very hot morning and good endurance building track.
And what about June 14th, 2021, the day before of this incident?
Corsa was started in an opposite block from the start of the track. She worked that area, crossed the road, and continued working the next block. She worked back and forth. When she caught odor, she got very excited behavior. She worked this area of the start of the track. Once she took off on the track from here, she was nose down and worked this track hard. She stayed right with the track and worked it very well for the amount of bake time in the heat.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
So, Officer Buckles, by reading your notes dealing with the year that this happened, a few days or the day before, Corsa was able to work in the heat and humidity okay.
Yes, she was.
And no one's disputing, or there is no doubt that Corsa was panting and excited throughout times of this track and also on the scene. But once again, any concerns that she did not do a proper track?
No, I did not. I understand that she was excited and panting, but as you can see, once I get to the point of deploying her on the track with her command, that she does sniff the ground a lot as she is scanning back and forth throughout that entire backyard. She does at points come up and is panting because she is just getting breath, keeping herself cool. That's how dogs cool themselves down, is by their breathing. But she goes right back down and continues searching and sniffing the ground, and she does that multiple times. And I work her over and over again, back and forth throughout that backyard. She's worked in those conditions, and she's had success.
And I don't know, but how does Corsa search for someone that doesn't exist?
Sustained.
I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Johnson, your microphone's not on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. In none of those notes that Mr. Scheer just read you, did you remark that your dog was panting? Did you?
No, I don't recall reading any of that.
But there are entries in the log where you remarked that your dog was panting.
Yes, my notes are always different for each training.
Right, but when the dog is panting, you've made notes of it before.
Yes,
When your dog is hot or tired, you've made notes of it before.
yes.
And none of those that Mr. Scheer read you was the dog hot or tired or panting. Is that right?
I don't recall ever making comment that she was panting.
Well, you didn't make a comment that she was hot or tired either, did you?
Okay. Thinking back, I guess I didn't. I'm not recalling stating those comments.
Well, I mean, Mr. Scheer just read them to you.
Yes,
And you agreed with them.
yes,
All right. And nobody's disputing that when Corsa gets on the track, she stays on the track, right?
correct.
She can do that. And if she stays on the track and she runs across a cross track, she can distinguish that and she can stay on the track, right?
Correct.
That is clear from your logs.
Yes,
But what is also clear from your logs is that when she gets hot and when she gets tired, that affects her performance.
correct. But she has still been able to track while panting. And in this incident, in the video, you can see that she is panting before I start her, but she also searches very hard during the approximately 10 minutes that she is attempting to locate a track. And then when I am done having her search that backyard and I give her a break and put her into an off position, and she knows that she's done searching at that point, she is directly in front of my camera and she is panting.
She's panting hard.
Well, yeah, she's done searching, she's on break, she knows that that's her time to relax.
She's panting hard throughout that entire video.
Yes, she does. She is panting, but she is also sniffing the ground very well throughout that. But like I stated earlier, she can't, from the moment that I start her to that 10 minutes later, she's not going to be able to smell with just her nose that entire time. She has to take breaks and raise her head and start to breathe and pant to help cool herself down.
Well, how well she's sniffing, you really don't know. I mean, she alerted on that tree, and she alerted close to the house, but you don't know if she you, go ahead.
Gonna rephrase?
I can rephrase it, Your
Okay,
Honor.
go ahead.
You can't read the dog's mind, right?
Correct.
And
but
you don't know if there's older odors on there that she's not sniffing, that she might otherwise have been able to sniff if she wasn't panting so hard. You don't know that, do you?
But with her panting and her being able to show a change of behavior at the tree and also show a change of behavior over by the corner of the house and start to take that path of disturbed vegetation up towards the back patio shows that even though she was panting, she was still able to smell odor and disturbed vegetation in those two spots. Throughout the rest of that search area that I conducted, she did not pick anything up.
My point being that you don't know if she was missing older odors that wouldn't be as detectable because she was panting so hard. You don't know that.
I mean, there's always a possibility, but if you're focusing on that she was panting, she was still able to detect odors. So therefore, there's still a good chance that she would have been able to pick up other odors that were inside or that were in that area due to the fact that she has completed multiple tracks and has had success on the street of tracking suspects that the track has been sitting for an hour or more or around that area of time frame.
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
Anything else, Mr. Scheer?
No other questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Officer Buckles, you are free to step down and free to leave. You may. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a little bit early, but doesn't make sense at this point to start another witness at the end of this long week. I am, before I let you go, going to give you, just remind you of the admonition, go into a little bit more detail. We have a weekend. This is going to be a little bit longer because we also have the holiday on Monday, so there's going to be 3 days between, before we see you again. And I want to emphasize a couple points. Again, I told you earlier, it's important that you keep an open and attentive mind. You've heard a little bit. There's a lot more to hear, and it's important that you keep an open mind and not make any decisions about the final outcome of this case until you begin your deliberations. Again, 3 days, you're going to have people ask you, what have you been doing? How's it been? What are you thinking? You are not to converse with amongst yourselves or with anybody else related to any subject concerning this case. You're not to allow anybody to talk to you about this. And again, it's going to be hard, but we expect you to comply with the instructions that we've given you. As I've said several times, this case is, and will be the subject of media attention, newspaper articles, radio, television, live stream. There's going to be comments. And so, again, you're to stay away from all media. This gets back to the talking to people. People have been watching this. People are going to be reading about it. They're going to want to talk to you about it. You can't do it. So avoid any sort of media which could potentially reference this case as long as you are a juror in this case. Related, there's social media. So you're not to communicate with anybody about this case. That doesn't just mean in person. You know, don't put something on your Facebook or your Snapchat. Whatever you use, if anything. Do not communicate about this case, and do not consume any communication. You may have somebody who's a Facebook friend of yours say, hey, I see you're on jury duty. Let it go. I know it's tempting. Just let it go. So avoid any communication about this case. And lastly, I'm just going to remind you again, you're not to do any sort of investigation about anything you've heard. You've heard a lot today that, hey, that's interesting, I want to know more. Once you're done, you can investigate and research to your heart's content. While you're a juror, the key is we need to make sure your decision is based on the evidence that's submitted here in the courtroom, not any sort of independent research that you may do or may find out about. And so don't do any research or investigation on your own. You've seen a map. Again, don't investigate the scene. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. Don't research the parties, the lawyers, myself. Again, once we're done with the trial, you can do all of that to your heart's content. I'll release you from the admonition, but again, we really kind of want you in a bubble. I mean, that's the whole point. You're in a bubble. The bubble is this courtroom, and we want your decision to be based on what is said and heard while you're in court, and that's how the process works. And as I mentioned to you yesterday, you've all seen kind of all the steps that at least you've already observed to us getting here. And there's a lot beyond that you haven't seen, and so you can help us make sure that for some reason we don't have to retry this case, at least not something that any of you did. So appreciate you all following the admonition, being attentive, and would ask that you be back here ready to go at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. Everybody enjoy your weekend, and if you have a holiday on Monday, enjoy that as well. You can leave your buttons here in your thing along with your notes. We'll collect them, put them in a safe spot over the break, and they will be there available for you Tuesday morning. Thank you very much, everybody.
All rise.
All right, go ahead and have a seat, everybody. Ms. Slaughter, Mr. Scheer, anything you need on the record at this point? Mr. Johnson, Ms. Garner, Ms. Foley, anything on your end? No. All right, just a couple things I do need. We talked about jury instructions, so we have I think originally, you guys, we extended the deadline to today. Obviously, I'm not going to get them today, which is fine. I wouldn't do anything with them today anyway, but I would like to work on them over the next 3 days. So if you can get them to me no later than noon on Sunday, that will give me a day and a half roughly to look at what you've got based on kind of informal discussions that we've had. I'm not anticipating huge issues, but I'd still like some time to look at those and proceed. And depending on what we get, obviously we can make a record on whatever we need to make a record on with respect to the jury instructions. And then the only other thing is sometime over the next 3 days, if Mr. Johnson, if you can email me and counsel letting us know if there's any issues with Exhibit 6 as is. And if not, then I think what I would plan on doing is just indicate that on the record and just say Exhibit 6 as submitted is fully admitted with no objections. And if you have an issue, we can take that up. All right. Anything else? Okay. Well, you guys have a good weekend as well. We're adjourned. Yeah. That's the only one we have, yep. She took 6, and Jordan,
paper copy to like a court per se, but I made this minor for the jurors, and I put all of my exhibits in here.
Sure, we're just gonna
So
have
I'll
to
just
remember.
send this back to the jury. But we'll go through at the end and pull out stuff that's not admitted. Because right now,